Now, the next item on the show is a pretty controversial one, and involves what we've been talking about for the last few months. Really, is the danger of a Starmer government for the NHS, considering that we are seeing constant statements from Wes Streeting and Keir Starmer that outsourcing more of the NHS is the answer for the NHS. And we've been trying to call that out, but it doesn't seem that that's been very popular with other campaigns who are not focusing on Starmer and are looking at the Tories' record. So there's a kind of there's a conflict about who should we focus on, the Tories or Starmer. I mean, the likelihood is, for me, Starmer's, what is it, 50% in the polls, or 45%, gone down a bit recently. But the likelihood is a Starmer government would be worse for the NHS than a Tory one. Now, Dr. Bob Gill has made this, has been on the show many times, as we all know. How are you doing, Bob?
Hi, Crispín.
Yeah, you've been on the show many times warning us about what's going on, and you've spent at least 10 years of your life dedicated to pointing stuff out about the privatisation of the NHS. Now, there's been a complaint about you on the Keep Our NHS Public website about your appearances on this show. Actually, I'll show you the screenshot here. This is from Keep Our NHS Public. It says, our work under sectarian attack. During our non-stop work for 18 years at local and national level, Keep Our NHS Public and some of its members have occasionally come under sectarian attacks and false accusations, sadly sometimes individual and very personal, for which there is no basis in reality. Most of these false allegations over the past 7 years have come from one individual, Dr. Bob Gill, a disaffected member of the organisation who left KONP in 2016. Until now, we have decided largely to ignore these baseless slurs in order not to give further attention to such unwarranted lies, nor divert resources from our work to save the NHS. However, Dr. Gill has recently been using the platform Not the Andrew Marr Show to extend his attacks, which had been initially targeted at KONP, to include other organisations which are allied with us in NHS Campaigning, People's Assembly and the Socialist Health Association, and also We Own It. These attacks so grossly misrepresent our organisation and the others targeted that it no longer feels fair on our members and supporters to fail to counter these allegations. We can no longer sit back in silence when not only is our organisation under attack, but more importantly, the work of hundreds of local campaigners up and down the country is devalued and dismissed as a waste of time. And then we've got this, I don't know, pull quote or some sort of thing. Sectarianism serves to turn people against each other, dividing the movement at a critical time for the future of the NHS. We cannot allow it to have this negative impact. This is why we have decided to address this issue now. There's a lot in what's been said there, Bob. But you know, I know. Can I just make one point before you say anything? I don't believe that you have criticised We Own It at all. I've never heard you criticise We Own It on this show, so that doesn't seem to be a correct analysis. But anyway, what would you like to say in return, in response to that? I mean, it goes into detail about the campaign of KONP and how much they've done. It goes into saying that they criticise Labour every now and then. They've done critical things of Labour, and that they're not beholden to trade unions. That they work with trade unions, but not beholden to them. And also, it said that you make allegations about astroturfing as well. What would you like to say?
Yes, thank you, Crispín. So the first thing to say is the lie within that statement, which is the fact that I left in 2016. What actually happened was I was an elected representative for a local campaign group. I put in some motions to attend the KONP annual general meeting. The night before the meeting, I put in a late application to become chair of Keep Our NHS Public, only to find that my membership was withdrawn without any process. I went along to the meeting anyway, and they had put two senior citizens on the door to try and block me from entry into the room. Then I went in anyway, and then they made several announcements that only current members can speak. So by that point, my membership was withdrawn. I got up to speak to the motions. I started to film some of it, and certain language was used to shut me up, and there were more lies spoken at that meeting. I have a video recording of that meeting, which I might have to rely upon to defend what I'm describing here. So I didn't leave. What they got rid of me without any process. And we heard about the subject access requests. I did a subject access request to try and discover the email chain that led up to my membership removal. And that was dealt with by the very people who had done the removing. So, they're painting themselves as open and democratic. They're not democratic. They rigged their own elections. They made sure they had their approved candidates, very similar to what Labour's doing, actually. So that's the first thing to say. So they're lying within their statement. The next thing they claim is, I'm sectarian. Well, I'd like to know which sect I belong to. I have no membership of any sect that they're trying to put me in. What I am absolutely critical of, and which they don't like, is how the unions and the Labour Party have sold out the NHS and have sold out their members. Now, what Keep Our NHS Public do, they parachute in key personnel. I'll give you one example. Somebody from the Blair cabinet was parachuted into the executive without any discussion. Another key member of the executive had close ties to a group called Labour Finance and Industry, which was the key proponents of adopting private finance initiative, which goes back to the early 2000s, and we know the devastating effect of that financial scam. So if you look at the personnel that have been drafted in, if you look at how they run their own processes, if you look how they object to any challenge, and also if you look at some of the people they offer platforms to. So it's a shoe-in for the unions like GMB. GMB is a union that has signed up to the 2022 Health and Care Act, which privatizes the NHS. They're given a platform. There was one person who is a director of a chain of GP surgeries and is also an independent advisor to a private provider, which was given a platform on Keep Our NHS Public. So, I could go, there's a long litany of things that I could go into. But the most important function I think Keep Our NHS Public serves is, no doubt it is full of some very keen, enthusiastic activists who have managed to achieve quite a lot. So there was a campaign against, people might remember, the International Trade Agreement, TTIP. Now, there were some activists who were very motivated, who saw the threat of TTIP in terms of opening up the NHS to international capital and capital funds for it to be exploited. Those campaigners within Keep Our NHS Public managed to persuade the leadership to adopt a strong position to oppose TTIP. So it has done good work, but the good work has come from the members, where they struggle against the leadership. Now, this should not be happening in an organization which is primarily motivated to achieve something. And finally, in terms of being not aligned with any party, well, Keep Our NHS Public came into trouble with the Electoral Commission for supporting the Labour Party in 2019. And I believe they had to pay a fine and they had to change their status to avoid legal liability. So, this is not some angelic organization. They make lots of mistakes. Their messaging is very poor, but it's full of some very good people. And I'm still in contact with a lot of people who spent years within Keep Our NHS Public, as I did, who are very disappointed with the leadership. So I say to people who are in Keep Our NHS Public, keep up your good work. but you need to scrutinize your leaders more. Yeah. And without that scrutiny, you cannot expect them to do the right thing. And finally, on the term AstroTurf, I believe, yeah, that's an inaccurate term. AstroTurf are normally funded directly by the commercial interests. I would align the leadership more to the term controlled opposition, whereby they're there to keep people busy, marching around in circles, achieving some things here and there, but to contain their activity and direct it towards Parliament, which we know is a dead end, and avoiding the other targets, which are the commercial companies who are profiting from the NHS. People like United Health, people like Boots, people like Specsavers, who are the beneficiaries of the outsourcing. Yeah, I don't believe KONP has ever launched an activity against these commercial interests. They need to be more like Palestine Action and less a talking shop.
Right. Now, look, there's someone from a former KONP executive member, Francis, is on the call. How are you doing, Francis?
I'm fine.
What would you like to add anything to what's been said?
Well, I've been in KONP since 2006. My background is nurse midwife, and I've been involved all my working life in either setting up trade union groups in different hospitals, including the London, and very active guys to try and stop the beginning of trusts. In 2006, we formed ourselves because we've been active against the PFI, and that time Wendy Savage was the president, and it was apolitical, and we wrote letters to every MP and every member of the Lords when we were campaigning. We used to go to her house, so it was all done, and there were several elections during that period, and it was all done apolitical, but attacking and demanding the NHS to keep to a public service. And then 2013, Wendy wanted to retire, which is understood. I worked with Wendy, by the way, at the London, and Sue Richards, who we'd never seen before, was brought in by Wendy, and we wanted her to take over. And we said we wanted to see her working within KONP. The next month, and this wasn't a formal executive, it was just a group of KONP members. She was announced by Wendy, and everybody voted for it, that she was the new secretary or leader. From there on, Greenwich KONP, I always called ourselves the renegades, because we continuously exposed each move to get rid of the public service, public provided and public funded NHS. And this started way back in the 80s when I was at Guy's. They were flying out to John Hopkins every several months, the Guy's team. So that's when it started, and it started happening there with accountants and business managers, etc. So I personally was well understood. And then in I think it could be 2015 or it could be 2014, we decided to formulate and produce and have a voting executive. I stood with several others, and there was a campaign, and Wendy was part of it, saying I wasn't a team leader and I wasn't this and I wasn't that. I did get elected, and the first meeting was going to be held, and it was held without my knowledge, and Bob got elected on that occasion without his knowledge, with a few with Wendy Savage, Sue Richards, at John Lister's house, because he had a spinal operation, but we're not informed at all. I won't give you it because it's a big story, this, right. But the carried on, and then of course we campaigned against the procedures that were going to be removed that were not worth having in the NHS. And in Greenwich, we did so well. Out of 17 procedures, only 14 had to stay. But nationally, there was no campaign by KONP. I think there was a campaign up with called 999 NHS, but we actually stopped it locally. But because of what didn't happen the rest of the country, we were stuck with the 77 procedures that are now being removed from NHS. So that's one example. And each election, we had hustings. We went to all the business managers everywhere. And when we heard there was a consultation on, we were ahead of them because several of our members on a reference group, which were monitoring and challenging all the new stuff that was coming out. Up came the 2019, the Act, and the primary care, the primary care PCN, so the primary care networks appeared in the official NHS documents, and it said quite clearly that the primary care networks and the ICSs were the building blocks for the PCNs. It was a big meeting at the national meeting, and we had produced a leaflet with the help of Bob about your GP will never be the same. And there was a big discussion on the PCNs about the finance and this, that, and the other. And somebody who was on the committee, who was from Cambridge, a retired psychiatrist, said she'd already had trouble, never seen a doctor, emails only or digital. She could not see a doctor. Anyway, the discussion carried on, and the chair at that time was Tony O'Sullivan, and the chair is supposed to be impartial, and he suddenly produced our leaflet and said, so we agree this leaflet is inaccurate. I said, hang on a minute, Margaret has just said what's been happening to her. He said, that was before this leaflet. And he shouldn't be doing it, he was the chair, but nobody else had seen the leaflet, wasn't in front of them, and the vote was against us. And that repeated time and time again. And so that's just one example.
Right.
But the
okay, I'm just aware about the time, but
yeah.
It sounds to me like they have, you know, Bob was.
There's one important thing. In the 2019 elections, we had a national meeting in Leicester, and I think it was the Angel, and it was agreed that the leaflet that Tom Griffiths, the campaign officer, wanted to produce, was opposed because we said it was attacking the Tories, that we needed one that wasn't attacking anything but pushing for the NHS. The next meeting of the executive, it was changed completely. They have produced a leaflet saying attacking the Tories, and on just a week before the election, we had a meeting of all the all these candidates, 5 of them. The place was full up. But before that, Lewisham had come up to Greenwich and used the leaflet that we were opposing, and they were fined by the election organisation and fined £200 because it said it wasn't an impartial leaflet, because it was against the Tories, and there they developed into a limited company. Okay, well, look, thank you, Francis. There's a lot more. It sounds like there's a lot there already. Thank you, Francis. I just want to cut back to Bob, really. It sounds like, I mean, the way they've said in that statement that it's only you that has been critical of them. It's like there's really got something against you, and you only seem to be passionate about telling the truth. And it's, you know, how do you feel? It must be quite upsetting to see your name put out like that.
Not really. I think, you know, I believe it is a response to the truth. They do not like their actions being exposed or challenged. I don't feel threatened by them. I can stand by everything I'm saying. It is a bit of a lonely business because there's a lot of people who have been disillusioned by KONP and have quietly left. But I think that's a waste. People need to know what's going on in these organizations that are taking money from the general public And, you know, where is this money going? Is it going on expenses for the officers, or is it going into active campaigning? And in terms of how successful have KONP been, well, you know, they've been going for 18 years. And if you just look at Twitter, they've got 65,000 followers. And you've got a group like Every Doctor who've done great work. Within 3 years, have 150,000 followers, right? So on that one parameter, they are not a successful organization, yet there's lots of money going in and no end product, right? So I'm a lone voice in terms of speaking publicly, but behind the scenes there are a lot of people who can validate what I'm saying. And maybe it's time, you know, a journalist gets onto this and does a full depth inquiry into it, a bit like Al Jazeera did into the Labour Party.